All right, folks. In our next edition of the drafting circus, we have homegrown talent, Northern American 100 Thieves versus Double Agent Summit on a Movistar R7. This is some of the this is a surprising loss for me because normally, yeah, NA is a trash region, sure, but in this case, I don't think we normally see ourselves lose to other teams in play-ins very often. So it really signifies whenever that does happen, it kind of brings the question as to what really went wrong here. And usually when I cover worlds videos, I usually cover the draft perspective. But this is actually an interesting case where I'm not too sure if the draft was the biggest issue here, but I will want to flag out some of the things that actually 100 Thieves did well, specifically from the draft department, and where like Giga Chad teams like Movistar just actually don't give a fuck, and they draft whatever they want, and they just play the game the way they want to play, and the way they have, like, the way they feel like playing, and whatever is good. And sometimes that's what makes it interesting. Like we covered the Vietnamese forbidden technology strong side jungle drafts, and now we have the Latin American like nonchalant drafting what just they think is good, and this is a prime example of that. And let's take a look here. So first draft, Hunter T very interestingly actually going for Cassante B1. I think it's not a bad thing, to be honest with you, because I think right now we don't really have a strong grasp on like what's an objectively strong pick in terms of the Z tier type champions. You pick this champ, we're just gonna auto win the game. We've been seeing a little bit of like Aurora, but even then I think it's a little bit contestable. I think the Aurora has some weaknesses as well. It's not like permanently good in every single composition, and I think arguably Cassandra is a better candidate. It just looks a little bit more out of place. Let's put it that way. You don't normally do that, but it is good because you don't really show much about your composition. And if you look at the 100 Thieves champs, it's actually pretty like bog standard. Let's put it that way. It's a very solid foundation for basically most comps that you're probably going to want to pilot. And meanwhile, you look at Movistar, you're like, this is my solo queue game. Like I got my brand jungle. Like you see brand jungle Jack's top. Like you have you're definitely luring on the side of a -3. If I'm in this lobby, if I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a Q dodge this one real quick. But like in this case, if I actually fact check this, and Audi, who's going to be piloting this brand, I think he just thinks it's the best champ in the game. So basically, what's happening here is that they're just playing around that actually, and they're basically facilitating that. What's crazy to me though, like it makes sense that because they think it's the best champ in the game, they just pick it early, but it doesn't make it feel better in my eyes. And it's circumvented by a couple of other really wacky draft decisions. I think Trist, that champ needs to go in the gutter. I think even other AD carries could be more prominent than Trist. Like I'd rather see Lucian mid over Trist mid at this point. I think if that high priority AD mid pairing with an AP jungler is what you're looking for, and the choice to really push AD to 5 is also interesting in the sense that they don't give themselves as many flexible options in other areas. While I would say AD, although there's a lot of decent options, there's the cash out against a champion like Jhin is going to be relatively limited unless you go for something crazy, like let's say Samir or not even Kaisa because it's banned, right? There's just not that many options left. So you really burned a lot of your resources on the roles that were the most flexible early on. And then because of that, you're kind of inflexible when it comes to time to really cash out your most important slot. So I think this draft kind of went out the window for R7, to be honest with you, which makes sense. It just looks really well-rounded from 100T. Quickly moving on to game 2. Spoiler. And this is what I mean by I actually think 100 Thieves have pretty strong drafting fundamentals when I do like my sanity check. Like when you see every comp, you're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. Like it looks pretty sound. This is all the makings of a pretty good comp. And the only thing I would really point out is that Yoni priority has been spiking up a little bit more. I think it's because of his good spread into most of the potentially strong champions at the moment, even though he himself is not like insane. So some other teams were like completely raw dog picking him at R1. I think that's a little bit too much, but I think there is a a lot of these champs that have really strong threat the moment you have enough information revealed. So I'm leaning towards this meta being more of like a red side type of meta, because I don't think there's any team. The B1 is not that strong, firstly, and then also the moment you reveal these specific champs, there's a lot of these champs that are like, the moment you pick a certain champ, then these champs become good, right? It's like you reveal enough that your comp is not tanky enough, then you can go Jhin, or you show Ezreal, and then you can go Jhin, or if the comp is weak to Yone, he'll be excellent later on. Or if you, but let's say for example, you pick Poppy late, it's fantastic. But if you pick Poppy too early, then they can probably draft around that, and you have to think about it a little bit more. So there's a lot of options in this case, and it's very interesting to see if teams are willing to catch on, or if they have different takes on this. So K'Sante B1 again, no problem. I'm not too pressed about this, because if they think the champ's just good, and honestly, based on what I'm seeing, the top lane pool is relatively small here. It's probably just going to be a lot of K'Sante, a lot of Renekton for the most part, and for the most of the meta, a lot of the meta. We could see some adaptations here with like if there's more creative players. Whipple has yet to play, but I think in this comp, like this is an example of the comp where 100 Thieves had a pretty sound sort of well-rounded composition yet again, right? Like you got the Aurora on 4 because it fares really well into the Orianna, and then you got basically jungle pre-counter pick based on the options available for R7. So they know that 100 Thieves know that they pretty much have to lock in a AD jungler, because AP junglers work pretty poorly with Orianna. However, I would have liked to see like something. I know it hasn't been picked yet, but like things like the Poppy jungle here, or potentially leaving themselves more open to get more options. But it is what it is, right? And honestly, I just remember that 100 Thieves lost this game. But from a draft perspective, it actually was a sound draft from 100 Thieves. I think it's like this is at least a 70-30 draft from 100 Thieves, in my opinion, because they neutralize all. Like the only losing lane really is the K'Sante lane, which is an excellent neutralizer, and then they basically are clear all over the rest of the map. And none of these champions are like dog water in any means, right? Their comp fares really well, and then I think in the context of a pro team, further validation as to why I know this is a good comp is because R7 basically won with the same comp in the subsequent game. So R7, they won that game actually, and it was because there were some really messy fights from 100 Thieves, in my opinion. The early game window that 100 Thieves were basically given everywhere else on the map, it was basically a lot of trade plays, and it was they didn't get the leverage they were hoping to get from that early game. And look at this, R7, they basically just play the same comp, swap in Renekton, and they just B1 Renekton instead of K'Sante, because they're willing to play that side. Summit's willing to play that side of the matchup every time, right? Noting the Narban again, I think 100 Thieves just do not believe in creating that weak side dynamic against Sniper. They probably have decided the way to play is that put the Sniper weak side the entire game, which is totally fine. 100 Thieves also go for a different direction here with the Jinx FTB type of comp. So if I'm R7, I'm either looking at a poke comp, which they've eliminated somewhat with the Ziggs ban, or I'm looking at an engage comp, which is totally possible and is facilitated by the Lucian Nami. If I'm 100 Thieves here though, and they show Renekton, Lucian Nami, like the first thing on my plate is, pick Poppy, guys. I'm getting a little obsessed with this champion. I ain't gonna lie. I think like surely there's got to be something I'm missing, right? Like that you could pick Poppy on 4 here. You would deny whatever jungler is remaining, because the jungle pool is not that big, right? Like you would then also deny certain mid picks that go forward. In this case, maybe the hindsight's a little strong here, but like LeBlanc, Wukong, like every champ here has a dash. It's like so strong for creating so much space against this comp. But instead, they go Viego on 4, and it's like a non-answer. It's a non-pick, and the Viego actually gets counterpicked by the Wukong here. And then they save R5 for mid, which is the Vex. And this is a different dynamic where it's like, yeah, the Vex is technically like a decent matchup, and sometimes you can use Vex as like a backwards pick to create space with her passive, but like I would say it's not real. Like you would be much better off picking things like the Poppy, or even like an Udyr at this point. If you're hedging against the Wukong pick and you're trying to play slow anyway, and then you can get a little bit more creative on your R5 pick and try to come up with something more defensive. Even a Galio would not be bad here. Like I'm not gonna be honest. Like there's a lot of options, and I think goes to show that 100 Thieves had a strong grasp as what's good, but as they started panicking and as things went further down the drain, then the draft started getting a little bit messy, and it's not far off the mark though, and I want to give them credit where credit's due. So I think it was actually decent drafting. I don't think it was like egregious by any means, and definitely because Movistar threw away the first draft. Let's put it that way. I don't think they definitely benched the brand after realizing it was some hot garbage in the Worlds environment. So kudos to them. So, but that's my review of the drafts between these two, and potentially why 100 Thieves actually lost to these guys, even though they draft so crazily. It's a mix of one, not entirely draft in terms of game two, drafting getting weaker in terms of like some specific scenarios, but also like trying to be very fragile with the current meta of drafting, and realizing that because you pick something early actually means that you're cutting off your own options. So that's the name of the game here. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I'll catch you in the next one.